Good morning and welcome to another Vivid webinar. Today we're going to have Anna Marie from Micro Focus talk to us about turning a service management support engineer effortlessly into a learning content author. This is yet another Vivid webinar brought to you by the fun folks here. Today I'm moderating. I am Chris Trimper. I am your Vivid Education Director and SIG lead for the education group. I'm also the Western New York LUG leader and am a test automation architect for Independent Health out of Buffalo, New York. Today, Anna Marie Jupe is joining us from Micro Focus. She's the lead solution consultant in the professional services EMEA team. She's worked in education and adoption for more than 10 years in a variety of different roles. She had experience from sales, delivery, and consultancy, and she delivers live demonstrations, like she will today, proof of concepts, and proves pre and post sales for customers across EMEA region on Micro Focus Adoption Readiness tool. Just a couple notes on housekeeping. This is a live session and is being recorded for all the Vivid members. Off to the side of the webinar control panel, you're going to see a section where you can type in questions, and we're going to hold question and answer session at the end of today's session. So I'd like to turn it over today to Anna Marie and hear all about turning service management support into learning content with some really great session details. Thanks, Anna Marie.
Thanks, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Wonderful.
Perfect. Okay, so good morning or afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're in at the moment, and welcome to this Vivid Special Interest Group webinar on turning a service management support engineer effortlessly into a learning content author. My name is Anna Marie Jupp, and I'm a lead solution consultant for Micro Focus Professional Services. My job is specifically around helping customers to maximize their software investment by looking at ways of improving their enablement and adoption of their software. I've been in this industry now for more than 10 years and have managed to work for 4 different companies without actually leaving an organization. So I originally came in working for Mercury, and then HP and HPE, and then now into Micro Focus. I've moved across from coordination to delivery management to field sales, and now I'm a solution consultant for education in professional services. So change is a big driver for me, and it's a fact of life for most people who work in the service management industry, whether that is due to the dynamically changing software applications you're using, changes to the processes you follow, changes in the staffing levels and attrition within your teams, or changes to your organization itself. And there's been a lot of changes for me since I joined Mercury some years ago. And I would say that this level of change is now pretty standard across a lot of organizations. None of us can do anything about that, but what we can do is to make sure we're ready and prepared for the sometimes unexpected changes. The only way to do this really is to stay on top of your game in regards to your learning and development. You'll be much better prepared for something you know something about. And for me, this is encapsulated in the quote that the rate of learning in the organization must be equal to or greater than the rate of change. And that means there's a need for lots and lots of learning. So let's just run through the agenda for today's session. In true learning and development best practice, we'll start with your story, which is a scenario based on a role within an organization, and present this topic from that perspective. So please do bear in mind that I'm only presenting one use case. However, we'll touch on some other potential use cases towards the end of the session. So I'll set the scene and talk about what we need and where we could start solving our issue. I'll move on to 6 different demonstrations, hoping they all go well, as part of the same use case, and then I'll briefly touch on hosting options and additional use cases, and then we'll wrap up and hopefully have some time for questions. So your story. You are a service management support engineer and you work in a team in a medium-sized organization. As a support engineer, your job is to handle and resolve the IT issues that come from the business users, and you use SMAX, or Service Management Automation X, to do this. There's been a lot of changes in your working practices as you've recently moved from Service Manager to SMAX, and there have been a number of people who've left and people who've joined, and the level of knowledge within your team has gone down accordingly. So the management team has now finally decided that the best practice needs to be locked in and standard processes using the new SMAX tool should be documented. And this now appears to be your job on top of the regular work that you do. And likely this is going to involve things like documenting the current practice, creating process guides, storing this stuff somewhere for everyone to access. They want to use it to increase the customer satisfaction from the wider organization, from the business users, to onboard new employees and to provide at least the beginnings of a knowledge base. So where would you start? Well, that's a big question, really. It would be great if there was some way to do this without you having to take on a whole bunch of extra work. And as this will ultimately provide better level of service to the wider business users, you can see it's pretty critical. So where do we start and what do we need? Well, we're going to need something because taking screenshots and writing instructions in a Word document is probably going to completely destroy your soul. And with the changes going on, literally no one has got time to do this. So where should we start? So we need something that will capture keystrokes and mouse clicks and automatically drop them into a document without having to write every action and download every screenshot and move away from the possibility of missing out important steps. It would be great if we could produce something that has some kind of video, something that might even have some audio with it too. And as a lot of people have got visual learning styles, and we need to take people's different learning styles into account. The video production software is really hard to use, and we could use something like Skype, but then we can't edit it very easily, and we could waste a lot of time getting the processes and the effort to get the processes correct the first time round. It would be great if we could maybe write some labs for new people so that they could practice some of the lessons and some of the processes before they get let loose on a live system. And because if they make a mistake on the live system, then that is a problem for everybody and could potentially decrease our customer satisfaction scores from the business users. So where will we put the content, and how can we make sure that the right people get access to it? And how can we facilitate other people contributing to the knowledge base so that we don't have to do all of it? So let's see if we can find something like this hanging around. Now, Micro Focus have a piece of software called the Adoption Readiness tool, or we call it ART for short. And let's see if that will meet some of these needs. Now, in SMAX, you'll probably be familiar with this, that you are able to create an incident template which pre-populates certain fields and saves you time when logging incidents, okay? And we'll record this process in SMAX using ART. So let's move on to the first demonstration. So I'm just going to switch screens. And hopefully you should be able to see SMAX. So Chris, I'm assuming you'll tell me if you can't, but this is the dashboard. Great, so perfect, okay. So this is the dashboard for SMAX. You may or may not be familiar with this. This is the ART capture engine. And I'm just going to start it recording here. So as I click through the process, what you'll notice is that ART is able to recognize the action that I've taken, in this case, the click. It can recognize the object in the GUI, so the My Dashboards, and it's recognized the object type, which is a button. It's taken a teeny tiny snapshot of the screen where the action took place. And what you can't see is that it's taken the entire snapshot of the desktop as well, and it will use this to build up a simulated environment. So we'll let that run and go through this process, and we'll just ignore the capture engine for now. Okay, so if I go into templates, if I had any templates, they would be here, but I don't. So let's create a new one. Okay, so our user is reporting an issue of being unable to print. And let's fill out some of the classification details. So it's single user impact. It causes a slight disruption Move that out the way. The printing service. I know it's in here somewhere. It's personal systems. Just collapse the classification and open the assignment. Okay. Currently assigned to the service desk. And we need to assign it to hardware systems. Hardware services. Okay, so that's all the information we're going to put in this template. So we go ahead and save it and then go back to the template screen. Okay, and now our template appears here. So I'm going to stop the capture engine and it's going to take me into the Art Developer Kit. And from here, you can make some edits and changes and you can publish. Okay. Because Art records the keystrokes and the mouse clicks, it records everything indiscriminately, then we can get rid of a few kind of extra steps. So I'll just do that here. And it's very easy to edit because the steps are all discrete. So by deleting some or moving them around, I'm actually going to affect the running order of anything. Here I can add in some more contextual information. So, you know, if we're going to show our users this simulation, it would probably be helpful if we told them what it was about. It would be really great if I could spell first time round. Okay, notes will auto size as I come out of them. And the other thing I can do is to also adjust the playback timings so that all my notes don't appear on the screen at the same time. That's another L&D best practice. Let's move that to the beginning of the simulation. Okay, and then edit the action so that this one appears slightly later. I add in a few more notes, like here. We should tell our users that if they had templates, they would show up here. And move that out of the way. If I wanted to add any audio in for my auditory listeners, I would just do that here. Okay, and you would just record a snippet of audio. That snippet of audio then belongs only to that particular step. So if I need to change my simulation, if my processes evolve, which happens frequently, then I don't need to record a whole audio track over and again. I would just need to re-record those bits of audio that had been changed or with the steps that have been changed. Okay, so that concludes the first demonstration. And let's just move back to the slides. Okay, hopefully you can see the slides again now. So we have captured the process, in this case, creating an incident template. And from this process that we've captured using Art and edited slightly in the developer kit, that's more than anything just to show you the functionality, not that we necessarily needed to edit it. we should be able to publish it out as a video for our end users and our learners, and also to start creating this knowledge base and documenting this best practice. So I'm going to move back to the demonstration. Okay. So when published, this is the simulation, or video, if you like, that we've just created. If I move that out of the way, it should help you see it better. Okay, so that was the note that we added in. I'll move my mouse out of the way. And here you can see, as I explained during the first demonstration, that art has recognized the action, and it's recognized the object and the object type, and it's taken a snapshot of the entire desktop to build up this simulated environment. So whilst this looks like the real SMACs, it's in fact not. It's a bunch of screenshots that behave in the same way. You can turn typing noises on if you like them. They drive me a bit mad, so I don't, but you can if you want to. And you see what you've got here is a very professional looking content that's been created literally just by recording a process that, as a support engineer, I could very well have had to go through anyway. So just let that run through to conclusion. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so we have got the video, but wouldn't it be amazing if we could create a process guide of this? Because in a lot of knowledge bases and ways of documenting best practice, this kind of written documentation is really important. So let's have a look back at the third demonstration, which is creating a process guide. So hopefully you can see my desktop. Again, let's move that out of the way. Okay, so we were working in art in the simulation view. Okay, and that's exactly how a simulation will appear. The other option you've got to work in art is on the document view. Okay, so depending on what it is you're trying to achieve, you can work in either view. But just let the view update itself, and then we can make some changes to it if we want to. Okay, so the document looks a little bit different to the simulation, but you'll see the screenshots, etc., are the same. We can edit it in the same way. So here, for example, you have to bear with me, I'm using a virtual machine. So there's a slight lag. So I might want here to give my user a bit more contextual information. Okay, so I can edit this in the same way, The note that we added here, I can remove the visibility of it so that it doesn't show in my document, and it only shows in my video. Okay. And let me show you how that looks published. Okay, so this is published out to a PDF. It's probably worth noting that all of the art documents are rebrandable, and that's a change with making the template and then publish all of your documentation out in the same way. You can see the purpose that we've provided or changed, and here what you've got is screenshots already dropped into the document for you. You've got steps in logical order. Here you've got a tiny or small red arrow which lines up to where on the screen the step takes place. You've got the object and the action and the object type, and you've got the teeny tiny snapshot, and then obviously you've got the entire desktop as well. So this was created at the same time that we created the simulation, and that works on single source multiple output. So for each recording that you make, you have around 20 different potential publishing formats, and from that, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve, whether it's test scripts, videos, or written documentation, you can decide which ones you want to publish from that one recording that you made. So let's go back to the presentation. Okay. So now we've got the video and we've got the process guide. It would be really great if we had a way of creating labs or allowing our users to practice, but not on our live system, so they can't make any changes to it or cause any problems for anybody else. So we'll go back to art. Okay, and this time we will go for a try me. Now, try me is a practice lesson, if you like. And this time, instead of sitting back and watching the demonstration, this time I am expected to click through the process myself. Okay, so the simulation won't move forward until I complete that particular action. So in this case, you can tell it's me because I'm moving the mouse around. I need to click here on my dashboards, and then I need to click here for an incident. So for the end user, it's a very good way of actually gaining some experience, practical experience of that process before you actually let them live on the system itself. Okay, and some of our art customers have actually put this in place as a way of gatekeeping. So before they provide the login credentials for the systems, they have their users go through these practice lessons first so that they've demonstrated their ability to be able to do it. Again, it's the same with the typing. If I want to type something else, it doesn't allow me to do that. I can only type in the text that is provided for me. Okay, right. So we won't go through that any further, but that gives you an idea of what a practice lesson would look like. So let's move back to presentation. Okay, so we have created a kind of simulated environment for our users to have a practice on, and that's comes with it, you know, a lot of benefits in its own right. But actually, it would be really great if we could test how well our users can complete this process and these particular tasks. So let's go back, and I will show you what we call a test me. So this time we will launch the test me. Now this is a graded assessment. So again, same simulation. So this is all about reusing the same content and the same recording that you created originally that took just a few minutes. Now this time I'm presented with the dashboard and I've got no hints as to what I need to do. You can add hints in as and when you prefer. It's often good practice to provide your user at least with a brief as to what it is they're expected to do. Now, if I click through the process in the correct way, the simulation progresses. But if I click the wrong thing, I get this note up which says to me, look, that's not right. Would you like some help? The minute I click yes, I will start to be deducted points. Okay, so I will start this simulation with a set number of points. Each time I make a mistake, I'll have a point docked. And if I get too many points docked, then that counts as a fail. Okay, this is a really good way of checking that your users can really do this before you let them loose. And again here, if I click somewhere wrong, I'm prompted for some help. Okay. Let's go back to PowerPoint. So that's our practice lesson, or a way of assessing skill levels. Now, hopefully that gives you a good idea of how you can record one process that you're going through anyway, and use that as the basis for a number of different types of enablement content or documentation or best practice guides, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So now we've got the content we created, where should we put it? If we had the ability to push it out to groups of people by job role, that would be really useful, as well as being able to track who completed which modules and assessments and whether they actually passed them or not. That's especially useful if you need to demonstrate compliance. With Micro Focus Art, you can upload the content you create to your own learning management system. Okay, most organizations have one of these. The files from Art are output as SCORM files or AICC files, both of which are industry standard for sharing e-learning content, and they can literally just be dumped onto your LMS. The other alternative is there is an ELE server in the Enterprise Learning Edition of Art, which has some additional functionality like based on the client server technology. Or you can just dump the content onto a web server, and that way you can get it out to a large number of people. That way you won't be able to track it though, but it's a good way of just getting that content out there. So the last demonstration will be showing you what the knowledge base would look like. So this is the ELE server where we keep our e-learning content. You can check it in to the server, very much like a SharePoint. It allows you to collaborate then on the content. So if you've had a number of people who are content authors or your subject matter experts on these processes and tools, particularly with an SMAX or others, then you're allowed to collaborate on them using this check-in, check-out functionality. Also gives you version control and indexing for an end user portal. So you have an authoring portal and an end user portal. The end user portal is a way of getting that content out to your people, and they will be able to search as well for the different types of enablement content that you've put in there. You can upload entire course modules, you can upload learning paths, or you can upload individual simulations, videos, PDFs. Okay, so let me just share that with you. Okay, so I'm coming out of the VM now. Okay, so this is the end user port, or this is the ELE server, and this is the authoring portal. So this is how the authors would collaborate. Everything here is in a project. You click on a project, you have a document library, And here, for example, in SMAX, you'll find all of the source files, okay? So all of the source files are checked in, and then they're added to a publishing queue, and then they're published for the end users. The end users would go into their end user portal, okay, and here they can access individual courses or the specific simulations and PDFs that they want. If I go into a module here, for example, I can launch it. And this is the kind of courses and modules that you could put in there. Okay, it's a bit more interactivity, some hotspots and bits and pieces like that. Easy to navigate, and of course, everything is labeled in a really logical and meaningful way, which means that your users can access the exact content they need when they need it. If I go back into one of the simulations, you can see that I have a number of different options here as to what format I want that content to be in. So for example, I can select here the PDF. So this is our process guide. So very similar, or I have the option to go straight for the simulation. Which runs as an HTML file. So again, all of this was created on the SMAX using art. Let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so art has some different use cases depending on which vertical you're in and which tool sets that you use. But in addition to creating enablement content and process guides and any other kind of documentation that you need around technical software application, you could also use art to create, so it's thinking specifically from a service management point of view, you could use art to create MP4 videos that cover very simple processes like how do you log on, how do you reset your password, how do you raise a support ticket, that are customer facing for the business users, if you like, of your organization. Okay, MP4s can be put on a SharePoint, for example, embedded in a number of different applications that can be accessed kind of there and then. So that's another use case for it. You can record tests of new functionality and processes in Service Management Automation X to recreate any errors or defects. You could use art to create walkthroughs of any new functionality or processes your organization implements in this particular tool, as well as providing tours for the business users. You could use it to document configurations made on your tools by external consultants, okay, and that's a big use case for some of our customers. And you could use it to document existing processes to find ways of becoming more efficient as an organization. And all of these additional use cases are still creating enablement content at the same time. So if your organization is going to automate the service and support process, then it certainly makes sense to look to automate the knowledge transfer and education process. So if you take one thing away from this session, I really hope it is that it's possible to automate the education process. Automating the service management process is top of most organizations' lists right now. So it follows that there are other parts of the organization which would benefit from this automation. And education is one of them, as there are many others. Self-paced, accessible, anywhere, anytime learning and best practice content is nearer than you think. Using a tool like art, hopefully you have seen how it's possible to do this. Even down to creating the enablement content during the testing process before new software is rolled out to employees. This way you can save masses of time, you can create better content that you've been able to do up until now. When I started with Mercury, some time ago, it was pretty common practice for learning to take the form of going out of the office for a week to a training centre where you spent each day doing labs, listening to the lecturers, drinking too much coffee and eating too much cake in my case. Whilst this still has its place in some situations, the overarching requirement for enablement is that it should be convenient and it should be available when I need it. It should be cut into smaller chunks so I can fit it around my regular work. A tool like ART will enable you to create the kind of enablement that works for your organization with content that's been created on live systems and live environments with real subject matter experts. You can automate this process, spend more time on being innovative, and facilitate well-trained and competent team members. Okay, so that's the end of the demonstrations and the presentations. I'll hand back over to Chris for some questions.
Outstanding. Thanks for that, Anna Marie. And we really appreciate that you put yourself out there and gave some live demos. Really made a big difference. So thank you for that. All right, we have some questions in now. Anyone attending, please feel free to send questions now so that we can make sure that your questions get answered. But we're going to start off with a couple that came in during your session. So we have a question here asking what the main publishing outputs are for ART.
Okay, so ART outputs as 4 different types of simulations: show me, try me, test me, and quiz me. That's a practice lesson, a demonstration, and 2 types of assessments. As well as that, it outputs to written documentation in PDF, PowerPoint, HTML, and Word formats. Also to Excel format for test scripts and MP4s for videos. There's about 20 different publishing formats. They're the main ones that I use on a daily basis.
Seems to be very versatile. Thank you. Can you create entire e-learning courses with ART?
Yes, you can. So what I showed you during those demonstrations was how you would create, just a one-off process. But best practice for your learners is to give them a logical structure to follow. So you would create a course module, and within that course module, you would embed simulations, so different processes that follow a kind of logical structure. This gives your end users a kind of start to finish approach to their learning. Each module obviously is a building block, and you can create a number of different modules to create courses and learning paths, etc. So it's very much whatever you want to do with it. There's a lot of flexibility with ART to do that. The beauty of just being able to access those individual simulations and PDF process guides is that people don't want to sit there and go through a module that might take them 40 minutes when they just have one question or one piece of information that they're looking for. So ART gives you that, the cover it from start to finish, or you just find the exact bit that you need.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like that's a really good technique for when you've gone through the learning and then some months have gone by and you might have forgotten one small piece that you don't use frequently. It sounds like you can go back and just look at that piece as opposed to having to go through the whole course again. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I say about people not wanting to go through all of, especially if they've been through it once, or if they've had, exposure to a particular tool before, maybe in a different organization, or maybe when it was slightly different or a different version of the tool. They just want to know how that functionality works. They don't want to go through it from start to finish as if they'd never had any exposure to the tool at all.
Oh, for sure. And it seems like it fits the on-demand culture that we all seem to be following. So that's pretty cool. We have someone here wondering, for the demonstration you gave, what version of ART were you using?
At 5.4.
You said 5.4?
Mm-hmm.
Outstanding. All right, next question we have. Could you explain how you would go about updating, I guess they said document, or maybe it's an e-learning course, when an application upgrade has occurred?
Yeah, so ART is really flexible in that way as well. Depending on how different your process is and how different the application is, it may be that it depends how much time you've got and all of that stuff too. Sometimes you could just add in a few little notes that say, in the version that you're using, it might look slightly different. The best practice is always to make the e-learning content look the same as the tool that users are working on a daily basis. So you can just go in, you can take a snapshot of the new user interface and the new screens, and you can literally just paste them into the art steps, okay, so where they change, and then you can just move around your action boxes and things like that. So that's one of the real kind of value adds to art, is it's very easy to maintain that content as you go through processes evolving, software upgrading, you know, stuff that hits people regularly. And content that's easy to maintain will be maintained. You kind of don't have any excuses not to keep on top of it, because it is a short job to go in and just change those bits that you need. I mean, art's very much a tool that, excuse me, that you can reuse content that you've got. So if you've created a simulation in art and you're going to create another simulation, but the first 15 steps are the same, you can just pull those 15 steps in, okay? So you don't need to re-record any of that stuff. You just start from those 15 steps and add your additional steps in. And the same for when you are updating the content. You just paste in the screens that you need. You don't have to re-record everything. You don't have to recreate the simulation itself. You just change the bits that need to be changed.
Oh, it's great, because it seems like in my organization, and probably many others, just to add on to that question, you know, you have it where a process, there's a new field that's mandatory that's added in there. And instead of having to redo all your documentation, it sounds like you can just pop in that new piece and just have it, I guess, republish?
Yep, so you just republish it. So I don't know if you saw in the Art Developer Kit on the left-hand side, you have like a step view. So each step is listed there. So say step 5, now you need to add this mandatory field, or put something in this mandatory field. You go to step 4, insert step from new recording, record that one step, and it drops it right where you told it to in that process, so that you don't have to re-record it because of one small change. You just pull in the new, you know, the bits that you need to change. It's about the reusing and not, you know, having to recreate things all of the time. It's the same with the audio that I mentioned during the demonstration. You know, if I add that new step, I don't need to record the whole audio track. I just record the tiny bit of audio for that one step.
That's nice. Doing demonstrations, I can recognize that trying to do one long track of audio is just terrible, but snippets are very easy to do.
Yes, one long track, yeah, especially if you're not using an editable or an easily editable audio recorder. I felt the pain before.
Cool. Now for the content, next question we have in is there a limit to the audience for the e-learning? They put down internal, external, contractors, or other.
So no, I mean, it depends where do you host it. If you want to put it on your LMS, but your contractors don't have access to the LMS, then, you know, that's something you need to think about, you know, an alternative hosting provision. A lot of LMSs are behind, for example, single sign-on, and I worked with one customer who has struggled with that because their contractors need the same content that their permanent staff do, but they can't get onto their LMS. So the way around that we found was to install the ELE server, and because, as well as you can put the ELE server behind your single sign-on if you want to, but if you don't, you can kind of keep it separate, and you can provide logins to those contractors to actually access that content. Alternatively, you can put it on a web server, and as long as that's not behind a single sign-on or whatever, then you're fine. It just depends on your organization. I think everyone is slightly different, and if it's a question that somebody has about how it could possibly work for them in their organization, I'd be happy to take it offline and work out the best solution.
Cool. Well, we're running out of questions. If anybody has any else to submit, please submit them. I'll ask, call it a selfish question. So for us, our corporate colors are, you know, our main corporate color is red. I noticed in your demonstrations a lot of the pop-out boxes were a certain color. Do you have the ability to theme all the way through and have it so that corporate branding feels like it's straight through all of your e-learning?
Yeah, you can. You make those changes in the template, and then everything you publish out is all looks and feels the same, so it has that real kind of corporate stamp on it, even down to kind of the color of the note boxes and the inside of those note boxes, all of that can be changed. Ours is obviously geared towards Micro Focus branding, so it's very blue, but anything else like that, you can change it to make it better reflect your own branding, even down to being able to pick the exact RGB colors of logos. And there was a box and kind of branding around the course module that I showed you for a SMAX course. All of that can be completely changed in the color scheme, the text colors and the lines and all of that stuff. So if you want to change it, there's a way to do that in the template.
Cool. And then, you know, given your history with Mercury straight through, it sounds like you've probably had good experience with all that, considering they've all had different colors.
Yes. And it's the first thing, you know, when a customer buys art for an e-learning solution, usually with a pre-built content pack. We have a number of those on SMAX and many other Micro Focus products. One of the first things they will do is create their template so that they will just republish out the content that we've given them, just with their own organization's branding. So, you know, for their learners, you know, it looks just the same as anything else that they might come across, from their standards of business conduct and their health and safety training, their technical training, all looks the same too.
Cool. Actually, one last question pop in, and then I think we'll close up. And it says, and I think this ties to what you were just saying, what sorts of applications or application technologies can they use for making courses with art?
So art was developed primarily for our Micro Focus application. So most of our portfolio, we have a content pack that matches. And this is a good way of saving yourself time in terms of content creation, because you can start with our pre-built content and you can tailor it to reflect your own implementation. But outside of our Micro Focus products, art will record against anything Windows or web-based. Okay, so that means that if you have a new expenses system, you can record how do you submit a expenses form, or, you know, if you wanted to look at how your service desk works with other third-party products that don't come from Micro Focus, that you are able to record that whole process from start to finish across a number of applications.
No, that sounds great, especially, yes, submitting I don't know how to submit travel expenses. I'm terrible at it, and that would be a good one to have. And secondly, you know, with Micro Focus opening up their doors to more things with, say, Octane integrating in with Jira, you would hate to have stop the e-learning at Octane, but to carry it through to other tools is pretty slick for a, you know, single pane of glass on education. Very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anything Windows or web-based, it will record against.
Great. Well, I think we're going to close up. So if we can just forward to the next couple of slides. You know, if there's any questions, pop them in. We can get them answered after the fact if need be. So we have a couple of upcoming events. We have 2 webinars, one on the evaluation of Octane and running Agile, and the other on how Atos uses the plate spin migrate. And then 2 meetings in Orange County and then in San Diego coming forward. We also, for the folks in the US, have a series of roadshows coming. These are really exciting. It's something that we're launching this year, where we have a full day of half ITOM, half ADM presentations, where a Micro Focus and partner and customer will meet to present about that. Lunch will be sponsored. There'll be a couple of dozen people expected at each event, so there'll be some seats for you. If we just go to the next slide, Anna Marie, because and go through the locations. We're going to have Atlanta, Georgia, Cleveland and Dublin, Ohio, Washington, D.C., Troy, Michigan, Richmond, Virginia, Chicago, Illinois, somewhere in North Carolina, St. Louis and Kansas City, Missouri, and Wisconsin. So with that, we're going to close up. We all thank you for joining today, and thank you, Anna Marie, for hosting this session with us and really giving us a great demonstration and look into art.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, thank you. We look forward to chatting more. You know, go to vivitworldwide.org for the recording of this and for other session content, and really just to come and collaborate. So on behalf of Vivit, thank you very much and have a wonderful day.